Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Empower Therapy and Coaching podcast. Today, I'm going to chat to David Watring, all-round interesting gentleman, been a teacher for many years. We'll get into that. He's also fostered for 2 decades and is a member of our men's group. So, Dave, the first thing I wanted to explore is your teaching career. So just tell everybody how long you've been teaching for.
Yeah, so this is, thanks, Lee. This is my 31st year in the classroom, primarily in elementary levels. So here in the United States, I'm year 6. I have taught up to 8th grade and then all the way down to 3rd grade.
So what kind of age range is that? Year 6 is what, like 11?
They're between 10. They come into me between 10 and 11, and they leave 11 or 12. So they're moving on to secondary school here in the States after this year.
So have they started to be teenagers at that point, or not quite got there
Oh,
yet?
yeah, that's exactly why I like teaching this age level, because they have a more sophisticated sense of humor. So you can be a little bit sarcastic with them, and they get it, and they don't take it personally, and then they are testing the waters. So they're limit testers, which keeps me on my toes, and really there are no two days that are the same with any of these kids, especially when puberty hits, which it does for many kids during this time period. So
Wow.
once that hits, it can be real interesting, but it does keep it fresh for me, and it keeps it new every day. Every day is new.
Interesting, and all bets are off when puberty hits.
Right. No, absolutely.
And you said, so you've been doing this 31 years. I mean, that's incredible. Give us a brief overview of how teaching's changed during that time.
Well, my first year I had a blackboard with white chalk. So just the technology itself has changed, and now I'm teaching in a distance learning environment, completely virtually with students using Google Classroom, and everything is, we're using Google Classroom, like I said, and Drive and Gmail and all of that. So we've gone from what some would consider pretty much archaic technology to pretty high speed things. So I have kids that they can film video and send it to me as part of an assignment. And yeah, it's really interesting. It's, like I said, the learning curve has been pretty steep the last couple of few months with the onset of the pandemic and how things changed. Yeah.
So I'm interested with that. One thing I Facebook, I see people posting like, we've got to get kids back to school because this pandemic is ruining them because they're not getting FaceTime contact and they don't understand how to read people's faces anymore. What's teaching like in a pandemic? What's remote teaching like?
Oh, it's roughly. I'm not going to lie. I'm a person I'm a teacher because I like to be with people. And so I sit in my classroom all day by myself, interacting with kids virtually. And in my district, the students aren't required to have their cameras on. So
Right.
I try and incentivize having camera on, just because for me, then I can see their face. And I do a lot of reading of facial expressions and body language. And I can't do that with a large circle with the student's capital letter in it. So it's been a challenge. And then all of my students, like myself, we opted for the in-person hybrid model. So at some point, if schools reopen, we'll be back in the classroom.
Right.
And some kids, there's some kids that thrive in this kind of a learning environment. They just want to be left alone to get their work done at their own pace, and they're thriving. And others that they need someone there.
Yeah. That's interesting. I know from like thinking about how I run groups and, when I've done cycling courses and stuff like that, and working with groups of people, like audience interaction is so important. And I can tell by looking at the face of the audiences whether they're engaged or not, whether I'm pitching this at the right level, whether I'm losing them, whether I've got to wake them up. Sometimes I'll pick on the audience to wake them up and to get them engaged. So I feel for you there. If they're not required to turn their camera on, you don't even really know they're there.
And it's really, it's more than that, because I have these segments of live interaction where I have instructional academic input, and then they're left on their own for independent practice.
Right.
So, if they don't reach out to me through email or come to I hold live tutoring sessions during the day. If they don't come to one of those, I have no idea until I go to assess whatever work they've turned in. what's going on. So yeah, it makes it very difficult and
And
challenging.
this is pretty new. So is this the first semester you've done like this, or were you working before like this?
Well, yeah. So the first like this, which is full bore integration of technology. I have a master's in educational technology way back when, and so I've integrated technology in my teaching since 2002,
Right.
and pretty adeptly. But this is definitely it's virtual learning. You're you're learning. I have 29 different learning locations, besides school. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And where were you based? Where's the school based?
So we're in Riverside.
Right.
Actually, I teach a half mile from home, so the
Okay.
commute's a rough one.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you're still required to go into school to do this yourself, are you?
I'm not,
Right.
but I can teach from home or from school. But one of the benefits for me is that if I come to school, I get up in the morning, I shave, I shower, I put a tie on. There's comfort. The first day I pulled I came to school, I'm like, oh, I'm at work.
Yeah. There's an
The
emotional
lines were
shift, isn't
blurred.
there?
The lines were blurred last spring. We
Yeah.
all worked from home. We weren't allowed to be on our school site, and so
Wow.
work and home just kind of commingled for me in an unhealthy way, because
Right.
I ended up just having work on my mind all the time because it was in the kitchen at the table. So I worked crazy hours and every single day, and it just wasn't healthy. So for me, it helps me to compartmentalize life. So even though, I do work, most teachers work at home at some point during the day, grading papers or planning or whatever.
Yeah.
It has helped me to compartmentalize. And then it's given me, purpose, like, hey, you need to get up and go to work. So, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I know, somebody who now, spends a lot of time working at home. I know how important it is to kind of block times out to do various
Yeah,
tasks, and also to say, right, that's the end of my day. Or you can just keep working and working and burn yourself out completely.
that's right.
Okay. So let's move on to kind of how that's then led into you doing fostering and what exactly that is and how you do that and how you started doing that.
Yeah. So, Lee, we have an extremely large family. My wife and I, we have 3 biological children. And then back in it would have been 1998, we began the process of fostering children that were part of the county foster care system. So we began bringing children into our
Let's just
home.
stop you there a second. What
Yeah.
led to that? What was the decision around that? And did you have your own children at that time? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, so we had three children at that point.
Okay.
Our oldest was 10. Our youngest she was 5 at
Right.
that time, and there were
And
just
3
far
wasn't
too
enough,
many.
Dave.
Yeah, well, why have 3 when you can have 9? So,
Okay.
yeah. Anyway, we just, Lee, we just grew weary of hearing about foster kids, an overwhelmed foster care system, and then there were a couple of instances where foster kids died in the homes of their foster parents,
Yeah.
and that was just a catalyst for us. Like, how can that happen? A kid that's been burned by their own parents for
Yeah.
whatever reason now goes into a county home and ends up dying at the hands of abusive foster parents. And we thought, we just can't. Like, we've watched this go on too long. It's time to do something about it. So we embarked on it, and we ended up adopting 6 out of the 7 kids that came to our home over. So we
So
have.
how many different children have you fostered over that period?
Well, it's actually just been 7, because we found this pattern that if they came to us to live, we ended up wanting to adopt them. So we only
So
had.
you've adopted 6 out of the 7.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
and the 7th had he been available for adoption, we would have done that as well. But he
Right.
ended up going back to his mom. So
Okay.
yeah.
Are you still in contact with him now?
Oh no. We have. So one of our adoptions, we've adopted 2 sibling sets.
Right.
Our oldest 3 adopted kids are siblings. So
Okay.
they came to us all at once, and then we
Wow.
have a pair of brothers who were placed with us on an emergency shelter agreement.
Yeah.
They were supposed to be there for 30 days, but it's been 18 years now. So, but Yeah. So we took in sibling sets, and then our youngest, we got her at 2 months old. She came to us at 2 months old. The little guy came to us from the hospital. He was 2 days old and drug exposed in the womb.
Wow.
We had him for about 5 months, and then we got a call out of the blue one day. I was at work. Sharon gets a call. Hey, we're going to come pick up so and so today. We're going to come get him.
Oh,
We had
wow.
never seen the social worker ever. No phone calls from the social worker, nothing. 5 months. They had no idea if the kid was even still alive. No
Oh,
clue.
wow.
And then called. I've never seen, my wife's a British citizen, and the Brits are very calm and collected, as you know, but once you cross the line, that's it, right, Lee? So that social worker, bless his heart, he crossed the line. And my wife took care of her business in the only way that she could. And we ended up getting granted 24 more hours because the kids were at school. We were at school. I had spent the first 3 months in a rocking chair at night, rocking this kid as he came off of his, heroin and
Drug dependency, yeah.
oh my gosh, it was unbelievable. And he was just jonesing for
Yeah.
what he had been exposed to. And
Wow.
it took us 3 months to get him to the point where we could lay him down at night and he would sleep. So,
Wow.
he was ours, all intents and purposes. He had become our son.
Yeah.
And but the system decided otherwise. That was
Oh,
real
man.
heart-wrenching for us. And
Yeah.
we at that point
And
were
also
like,
think of the trauma that must actually have on the child.
yeah, well, any kid in the system or any kid that's being neglected or abused, they have attachment issues already.
Yeah.
So all of our kids in one way, shape, or form, all of our adopted ones have reactive attachment disorder in some way, shape, or form. That just makes it difficult to connect with them on a super personal level, like you would with your own child you held from the moment they were born.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of a situation.
So I'm curious about that. So how have those relationships grown and been maintained as the children have got older?
Yeah, it's interesting with our own kids. It's so easy to point to a way they act and go, "Oh, that's your side of the family, dear, for sure." Like that was what your dad used to do, or Dave, that's the way you would have reacted back when you were a kid. So um, it's been interesting to watch just how the relationships evolved. Because it's not there are children on paper, there are children in our hearts, but we don't have any of the genetic. There's no genetic sharing
Connection. Yeah.
at all. Yeah, there's no genetic connection. So to watch some of our adopted kids as they've grown fall into the same patterns that their parents did has just been like, well, how did you end up here when you had a completely different upbringing? But then you realize, well, that's the genetic pattern woven into their family over time. I used to be a real big believer, Lee, in nature or nurture over nature.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you that this experience has led me to believe more that nature probably has a little stronger pull than nurture. But all of our kids, they're good people, they're productive adults. They just have their struggles that we as a family don't really identify with because we haven't had that similar experience historically on either my wife's side or my side. So we still love them and support them as best we can. And we make those connections. Each kid's a little bit different. So you connect with each of your kids in a different way, but we still have good relationships with all of them. Yeah.
Well, you think how different, I think about my brother and sister and how different we, all are. So you have those differences in your own family makeup with similar genetics. Right. And then, as you say, like you add exterior genetics into that and then how different that can make people. And like you, so I don't know if I've told you, I think I have, that my mum fostered 100 kids over a 10-year period.
Wow. I knew she had fostered that.
Yeah. So it was about 100 over a 10-year period, and they're all high risk and mainly short term. I think the longest was a couple of years. And, like you, I saw the big impact of nurture. And then as I've studied physiology more, genetics more, I've realized just how much of an impact genetics has as well. And, people are in some ways predetermined for particular traits. And that doesn't mean you have to behave like that, because you still get a choice, and we'll come to that.
Right.
We'll talk about the men's group work in a minute,
Right.
but you still get a choice, but it can make it much harder. Things like addiction can be hereditary, and it can be much harder to come out of that pattern. I don't know if you saw it. There's a great documentary on 3 identical brothers who were separated at birth and all given to different families. And then they discovered each other. I think they were in their early 20s when they discovered each other, just completely by chance.
Wow.
And some of the similarities that they had that you wouldn't expect them to have, that clearly must have been genetic. So it's a really interesting case study in the difference between nature, nurture, and just, but they could finish each other's sentences the first time they met each other. It was amazing to watch. I'll try and find out what it is.
I've heard stories of that, twins separated at birth. And,
yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah.
So let's delve a bit more into this foster care work, or really more adoption of foster care work, I guess. So at one point you've had 9 in the house altogether, plus you and Sharon.
Right.
11 in a house.
Yeah.
How?
Well, honestly, you made a comment about, isn't 3 enough? With your first child, it takes you X amount of time to get out of the house to go anywhere. With your second, you add, it's X plus 15 minutes. And with your third, it's X plus, you just add another 5. So it's X plus 20. After 3, it didn't take us any more time to get out of the house. It was just, you have never ending laundry and you're feeding an army. So, it's just the second highest bill we had monthly besides house payment was food expenses. Just when we tracked them, we're like, oh my gosh, we're spending almost as much on food as we do to put a roof over our head. And it's just,
I'm surprised you don't spend more on food than putting a roof over your head.
Yeah. And life, it's just a perpetual busyness and craziness, which I'm sure we'll get into that kind of a more talk when we talk about men's group, because that's been a particularly poignant kind of discovery for me since the pandemic hit. But it was just nonstop hub of activity, which my wife thrives on that. She loves the busyness. The more, the merrier. I have a level of tolerance for it that's probably greater than most, but I do have my limits. I like that. I want to, I still am looking for my man cave. Don't have a man cave. There's no space.
Oh man, you need a man cave.
Oh, I know. I have been advocating for a man cave for decades now.
You need somewhere to retreat to, for sure.
To no avail.
Oh wow. You got to go build yourself a shed. You got a garden?
A he shed, huh?
You just got to go build yourself a shed, mate. A shed with a padlock on it that only know the code to.
Well, sometimes I would just sneak out into the yard and go sit in the pool area and fall asleep. I come back, where have you been? It's been 2 hours. Oh, I was in the pool area just sitting down sleeping. So
I went out to recharge. I just needed to get away.
That's right.
I feel you. So, it's just me and Sarah here, and that's about my limit. So I have no idea how you cope with 9 other human beings.
I've offered it before. Anytime if you want to practice, I've got a few.
I know you keep wanting to lend some to me. Maybe one day, mate. Maybe one day. I've got some experience with looking after other people's kids.
Everybody could use little Uncle Lee in their life.
So I did, before I moved here, I did a Big Brother program in UK.
Okay.
So I think Che was 13, 14 when I first met him. So I worked with him for 2 years. So I think he was like 16 when I left the UK. And I would see him once a week, kind of 4 or 5 hours. And, we'd do things like go play laser tag or go to the cinema or go bowling, or, we'd always try to have some kind of activity or something. And then and when I left, I talked one of my friends, Tristan, into looking after him. It's like, it's your turn now, buddy.
Tag, you're it.
But even that was pretty tiring. That was 4 or 5 hours a week, and that was pretty tiring. So I don't know how you do 9. And how many live there now? So how many have you still got?
Oh gosh. So we have. Let me see. I've got to do a head count here. Sorry. 1, 2, 3. We have 4 plus Sharon and I still in the house. Yeah. Like I said, we only have 1 school-age child left, and we We've got some adult children that are preparing to launch, but it's, you know, it's more difficult to launch these days than it used to
They're
be.
preparing to launch, or you're preparing
Oh,
to launch
well, it's a
them?
little bit of both. I've got both hands in their back, and I told them, get those wings ready to flap. Start flapping them, you know.
How old's the oldest one?
Our oldest is a teacher in Palos Verdes. She's 31. And our youngest is 16. She's a senior at a local high school.
Okay. And how old's the oldest one still at home?
Oh, still at home? She'll be 23 in January. I was married and out of the house with a child on the way at 23. So I kind of look and I go,
well,
it's
I mean,
time.
it's, you know, we could get into the politics of how wages have changed and property prices have changed, and just how difficult, as you said, how difficult it is to leave home. I can't remember the exact statistic, but first-time buyers are something like 10 years older than they were 30 years ago.
Right.
You know, as you say, you know, people used to move out in their early 20s, get married in their early 20s, buy their first house or put a deposit on their first house. And now, you know, people are in their early to mid 30s when they're buying their first property. You know, they're still leaving home maybe in their mid to late 20s, so 5 to 10 years later, but their first property might be as much as 15 years later. It's a pretty big difference.
No, it's a huge difference. And so we've, you know, but we do want our kids to realize that they have to at some point embrace the journey towards adulthood. And that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, your 10-year plan is to be living with your parents still. So,
and there's a rite of passage, you know, it's an important thing to break away from your parents. We spoke about it in this week's men's group with one of our guys who kind of mentioned, now that he's at university and he's away from the family home, how much better he's getting on with his parents and getting closer to them, because you have to have that separation before you then can come back and form that adult bond with your parents rather than the parent-child bond.
Well, and all the nagging that you get when you're at home all of a sudden makes sense when you're on your own.
Oh yeah.
You know, it makes sense. I used to think that my parents were, you know, hey, they're the village idiots. And then I moved out. I'm like, oh, hey, they're a lot.
They were training me. This was practice. Yeah, my mum like, you got to get your washing done. You got to get this done. You tidy your room up. I'm like, Mom. And now I'm like, actually, that stuff was pretty important. I needed that.
And one by one, my kids have called me when they've launched out and they're making it. Dad, I just want to tell you, you're a lot smarter than I gave you credit for. And I said, what have I always told you? I'm a lot smarter than I look, you know. Give me a little more credit here, kid.
So tell me a couple of things that you've learned from this process. Like what's some of the striking things that you've learned from, you know, one, from the fostering, and two, from just being a father to so many children?
Yeah. So, you know, it'd probably be a couple of obvious things, but you know, everybody's different. I've learned that, and I've had to embrace that.
Yeah.
You know, growing up, college was the avenue towards adulthood. Like, you graduated from high school, you went to college. And so my sisters and I, we followed that path. That was the expectation. And when my oldest followed that path, I'm like, all right, here we go. Well, she's the only one to attend college out of the 9.
Wow.
So, and everybody has found, I've had one of my sons enlisted in the Navy. He's finding his way, and my other adult children who are working and living, you know, making their way through life. So I've kind of had to adjust that there's no one set path, you know. So it sounds obvious, right? Everybody's different, but the end is the same. Like, I want my kids to be good people. But at the end of the day, I want them to be good people and function in society as productive adults. And so they're all doing that in their way. It's just they've all gotten there literally 9 different paths if you mapped it out. So that's the big takeaway for me, which has been helpful as my grandkids start going to school and I start seeing the differences in their personalities. You know, it's helpful. It's helped me in my career because, you know, I realized, oh, hey, all of these kids, the end goal is for them to be productive adults, to get there and be productive and participate in society and all of that. So that's the biggest takeaway. The second one is that I'm more capable than I give myself credit for. So, you know, when we started fostering, we were literally wanting to take kids into our house that we could adopt, that were adoptable out of the gate. So our house sat empty for 3 months. We had this beat up old Ford Taurus station wagon and we had it all planned out, right? Oh, so we bought a minivan, 7-passenger minivan. All of a sudden, it was like, well, now we have our 5 plus the 1 kid we're going to adopt, plus, they can bring a friend. 3 months go by, no kids, no calls for kids that are clearly adoptable. So we called our social worker back and said, hey, we'll open up. We will take kids that are potentially adoptable, and we'll consider sibling sets. So that we get a call a week later, it's a sibling set of 3. So of course we say yes, So
Straight
now
out
I
the
have
gate, 3 new kids.
Yeah. So now I have a 7-passenger minivan, and I have 8 people in my family.
Someone goes in the boot.
Yeah. So much for the best laid plans of mice and men, right? We went out and had to buy a 15-passenger used commuter van, and that's what we used to transport our family. And it was expandable to, 13 others beside ourselves.
Have you seen the Keeley family, the Cortman family minivan?
I can only imagine.
I can't remember. It's like an ex-fire truck or something. They got this big red van. So Keeley is an athlete that I coach, and is it 12 in her family with her?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big family.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are 2 things that everybody's different. Their pathways are different. If you have a common result you want to see, it doesn't matter really how people get there. They get there in their own time and space and their own way. And then I never imagined having 9 kids, but now I never could ever imagine not having 9 kids. So it shifted my focus from what we thought, what I couldn't do. My wife was from a big family, so she understood the dynamics. She was race ready to go. And I was a little more hesitant because a smaller family, a lot less control over things, a lot more financial responsibility. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a burden. I mean, I just want to stop for a second and say, wow, recognize you and Sharon are just like, what an amazing contribution to society. What a contribution to those kids' lives. What might have happened had you guys not been there for them. So, so impressed, mate. Like, that's such an amazing thing to do, and such a, bloody awesome.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So kind of let's move on to, the pandemic's hit.
Yeah.
You were teaching, but you were teaching from home.
Yeah. So I had a different role. I had an out of the classroom role last year.
Of course, yeah.
My work location just changed from my office to home.
Right.
But it didn't really change for me on a professional level. I got busier because now I had to work with the school district to negotiate an updated contract to get us through this situation. So, yeah.
So how were you feeling at that point?
Well, so, the pandemic was it slowed things down for everybody. I mean, honestly, life almost came to a stop.
Yeah.
I went through a single tank of gas the first 9 weeks.
Yeah.
1 tank of gas. So instead of $40 a week, now I'm down to, what is that?
$10 a week or something, if that.
$4 to $5 a week in gas just to get around. And so it slowed me down. And that for me was troublesome, honestly, Lee, because I had a lot of time on my hands. I had a lot of time to think. and I can sometimes suffer from analysis paralysis. I overthink things. But what struck me is that I really felt like I needed something different from my life. What the stillness of not having to get up and go to work, being able to not shave for days at a time. I was still working, but I walked from, one end of the kitchen to get the coffee to my work table at the other end of the kitchen. I was there. I was just home all the time. And I found myself with a lot of extra time to think.
Yeah.
And I realized that I was uncomfortable with that. Like I was really uncomfortable with it because I had spent so much time being busy. I mean, you can only imagine with 9, we're just nonstop go, go, go. And then you add to that teaching and other things, track cycling that I do, and all the time go. So now the 3 times a week I would drive down to the track, they're gone. I'm doing all my training at home. Teaching, that's I'm now working from home. the 9 kids, we're now just kind of, we're all still. So as a middle-aged man, I began, I'm thinking about things like 7 years from retirement. I'm a grandfather now. We have 7 grandchildren, with the eighth on the way. And I want to be, and I know that I'm not quite who I can be. So that's
Okay.
what really kind of hit me right between the
Interesting.
eyes with the pandemic. And I struggled because I don't have, I have a couple of close friends, but we're all middle-aged guys. They're kind of going through the same thing. So, we didn't really, I didn't really have any outlet to kind of talk about how I was feeling on the inside as being incomplete, or something's not quite right, or there's something missing here. It's a 1,000-piece puzzle and you're missing that one piece.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's something we hear a lot in the work that I do, is like, outwardly my life seems pretty good and functional and I'm successful, and but something's missing and I don't know what it is. And also a lot of people can't be still with themselves.
Right.
Like, that's a really scary thought, to be still. And especially somebody like you, as you said, your life is so busy, then all of a sudden, bang, like life is half as busy as it was. And, I definitely experienced that too. Going from being at the track 5 days a week, coaching or training, and, at the gym 4 days a week, to suddenly none of that, and just being here and mainly by myself, like all the time. Yeah, it's quite a big change. So what attracted you to being part of a men's group? What was the attraction there? And let's explore how it was compared to what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah. So the men's group came at the perfect time for me personally, because like I said, I work in a female dominated profession. So I'm the only male on my staff. There are 30 of us, and I'm the only male classroom teacher. There are other male support staff, but I'm the only male teacher. I live in a house where my sons are all gone. And so I'm in a house by myself. I'm the only male at home. So there's a lot of only maleness.
So let me just do that math. So there's what, six women at home still, or something? No, we've got like 5 women at home.
Yeah.
Good God.
And so, yeah.
And there's 16 and upwards.
Combine that with no man cave, storm, right? Yeah. So the men's group came at the perfect time, because honestly, Lee, it'll sound crazy, but I'll say it. I felt like the loneliest person in the world. I did. So when the invitation came for the men's group, I thought it's an opportunity to start to connect, because I don't have sustained significant relationships with other guys. Years ago, I had breakfast with the same group of guys every Sunday morning at 6:30. We did that every week, and we had an accountability group. It was great, but that was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And since then, I've had nothing. So, as a struggling male and realizing that there's got to be something different, I thought, okay, the men's group I'm going to give it a try. Worst case is it doesn't meet my need, but I'll never know if I don't try. Yeah. And
And then what was your preconceptions, and then how was it compared to what your preconception was? So you joined the group. What was your preconception before?
Yeah, it's turned out a little bit differently than I thought it would be, Lee, and in a good way. So, initially I thought it would be much like the Sunday breakfast group that I had. Hey, how was your week? Anything you're concerned about? Is there anything that you want to talk through? Very loosey-goosey, really no structure. But it was just guys getting together and talking about life. The men's group has been that, but there's been so much more structure that's provided me with, these coat hooks, so now I'm learning about, okay, identify your feeling. Like, that was the first thing you had us do. Week 1, we want you to feel one of these, what you're feeling right now. Well, as someone that never has done that, honestly, other than when I'm really angry and it's obvious to other people that I'm really angry, to have to sit and think, okay, how am I feeling right now? It was weird. And so it was a bit awkward for me on a personal level the first several weeks, because I'm like, okay, I'm in this virtual setting again, another virtual meeting.
Yeah.
8 guys that I don't know, some from other parts of the world. And now I'm sharing how I feel with complete strangers, which nope. Nope. I don't just walk, have you seen the iPhone commercial where people, my credit card number is,
Yeah.
I've researched 3 divorce attorneys today where they're announcing these outlandish things in public. I'm thinking, okay, that's what it feels like. But I've been pleasantly surprised at how much I've gotten out of it, and the realization that there are other people that feel like me. There are other guys that
It's
feel like
always,
me.
there is, and it's always fascinating to me, like when I start the groups, the first 2-3 weeks, like as you say, everybody's like, hang on a second, what's going on? And like, I'm just going to hold back. And then there's one guy that breaks. There's one guy, I think you probably remember it was in our group, one guy that kind of like, right, this is what's going on for me right now. And once that happens, floodgates are open, everybody feels kind of okay to jump in and kind of say what's going on for them.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I know the same instance, the Giving Tree story. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I feel. What courage for that man to share that about themselves. Week 2.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay.
And it gives you permission, doesn't it? It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Nothing. He's shared his story, and nothing's happened. Like, he's okay, and the group's okay, and nobody's given him a hard time, and nobody's teased him or taken a piss out of him. It's like it's just been welcomed and accepted. Yeah.
Right, which is so opposite to experience and just in life in general, right? So when I reflect back on how I was brought up, boys don't cry. You don't show your emotions. You hold your cards close to your chest. Your emotions are for those closest to you. You don't feel. And so the business was a comfort to me. It was like a security blanket, being busy all the time, because I didn't have to be with myself.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden the pandemic hits. I'm with myself. I'm like, oh no, I'm not really comfortable with myself. Like, I'm not really happy with who I am right now.
Yeah.
Part of that journey was I was working a job I didn't really like. I mean, you remember that the first few listening to me gripe about my job. So the men's group has helped me process that, and then supported me in my decision, and made me feel like, hey, I had to do that for myself, right? As part of my ongoing health, I had to make a decision that would make me prosper more in the future, physically, mentally, emotionally, all of that stuff. So that's been really a nice, pleasant surprise for me, Lee, and continues each week to kind of surprise me. And I've been particularly thankful just for the tools that the Empower staff has given me to use. They're not just one-offs where you just use it once and throw it away. These are strategies and tools that when the group no longer exists for me for whatever reason, I can still use them.
So share one of those. Share something that's actually made an impact on your life.
Yeah. So at one point you had us set timers, right? And set a timer on your phone, set an alarm 4 different times a day. And at that moment, when the alarm goes off, just take a deep breath. How are you feeling right now? Identify the feeling, which, I'm thinking, listening, I go, that's kind of strange, but I'll try it. I'm willing to try anything because I know I need better for myself. So I've tried everything you said or have the group has brought forth. And so I remember doing that and then realizing, I'm have this outward appearance of being okay, but right now I'm really angry. I'm angry. So it's identify one of the 4 feelings that we do in group. That was powerful for me because I had never, like I said, people will know my feelings from my exterior, but I had never really taken a chance to inventory myself. Like, where are you at right now? And then from there, kind of, okay, why do you feel that way? Are you angry because you're anxious or fearful? Are you sad because, just to be able to identify it's been huge. And then to begin to connect it to something going on in my life that could cause that. And then going back to, again, like, what can I do about it?
I think you've hit a really important thing.
What can I change? There's just such a wide variety of things that the men's group have given me to be able to begin processing, just assessing and processing for myself, right? Which is powerful.
Yeah, I think that, one of the big issues for men is we see feelings, or we've been told feelings, like you shouldn't have them. Like men are like, hey, you got to be stoic. You got to not show your feelings. Like you're losing control if you show your feelings.
Right.
And actually our feelings are just information. It's just our body and our mind telling us what's going on for us in the world right now. And the better we get at connecting with those feelings, the easier it is for us to understand the information they're giving us. If we're angry, there's a reason why we're angry. And if you don't recognize that anger, feel that anger, you get stuck around what's causing the anger, and you're kind of confused, like, I'm angry, but I don't know why I'm angry. When you get more adept at processing the emotions, you feel the anger and you go, I'm angry, and I'm angry in this situation right now. Right. Why is this bringing up anger for me? What is this anger telling me? And now the anger isn't something to be ashamed of or to be worried about. It's just information. It's just saying to you, hey, there's something you don't like about this situation. What is it? And is it your own behavior, or is it somebody else's behavior? Is it something you need to deal with? Talk about, your job, and you were kind of angry about the previous job and some sadness around it because it wasn't the right thing for you. And then once you start connecting that personal anger with the role, you're like, this isn't serving me. I need to change my role.
Right. Yeah. And then to be able to go home and have, instead of going home and saying, hey, Sharon goes, hey, how was your day? Yeah, it was all right. End of discussion, right? I can actually open up a little bit more and say, I was really angry at work today, or this was made me really happy at work. Like I'm really, so then it helps me to begin express it in a healthier way, rather than keep the anger inside, and then kaboom, volcanic explosion of anger, which doesn't do anybody any good, right?
No.
My loved ones, not myself.
People see, so we work with 4 basic emotions in the men's group. So it's sadness, anger, fear, and joy. And people see anger, fear, and sadness as like the bad emotions, and joy is the only good one. And actually, they're all equal. All they are completely equal. They're just a physiological and psychological response to some kind of stimulation or some kind of stressor. And they're just information, and anger should be good, because anger can be healthy if we experience it in the moment and go, I'm feeling angry. What does that tell me? All right, I'm feeling sad right now. What is that sadness telling me? Am I hanging on to something in the past I haven't let go of yet? And fear is usually, can be about anxiety, which is about the future. So I'm feeling fearful. Right. What is it I'm feeling fearful about? What is it that I think is about to happen that my body is telling me could be an issue? And identifying that just makes it much easier to navigate through the world. And, one little tip here, any women listening to this, you want to have those conversations that you keep saying that you want to have with your guy who is a little bit more emotionally available. Buy a place on the men's group for him. And, we'll teach him how to be a little bit more emotionally available, and you can have those more in-depth conversations if that's what you want. And there is an answer here for you.
Yeah. So, and I'm fine. I don't need the timer anymore. I catch myself mid mumbling, and I'm like, okay, you're upset right now. What's going on? Oh, you can't get this plug in. Take a moment, look at the USB thing, make sure you have it facing the right way, and plug it in, dude. What's the story?
Men and stuff without reading the instructions. I will not read the instruction. I'm going to smash this thing into bits before I read the instructions.
That's right.
Been there many a time. Right. So give me some examples of how what we've done on the group has played out in your life, with your relationship with Sharon and your relationship with your kids. Is there anything you can kind of think of that's been helpful there, or differences that have come?
So we did this exercise with, and you'll have to help me with the wording, with shadows, right? So they're like a coach and challenger were kind of opposing.
Oh, so that's the drama triangle.
Drama triangle.
So the Kaplan drama triangle. So you've got the 3 unhealthy positions, which are the victim, the persecutor, and a rescuer. And then you have the healthy positions of those. So you have the challenger, the coach, and the other one's escaping me. Challenger is the persecutor. the rescuer becomes the coach and the victim becomes something like the doer.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had shared a situation at men's group about where with one of my adult children who I'm trying to get to transition into adulthood away from our house because I'm highly frustrated with the way she.
Both hands in the back.
So, yeah. So anyway, the group kind of called me out like, hey, you're more of a challenger in that case.
Yeah.
You know, how can you, and we talked through how the conversation with her could change.
Well, no, you were more of a persecutor in that case,
Right.
and you needed to move to being the challenger rather than the persecutor. So the persecutor's coming from a position of kind of looking down, you're doing it wrong, this is wrong, as opposed to the challenger would be, hey, have you thought about trying this? Or, you know, how would it be to try that? It's a much more, you're on a similar level and you're kind of offering rather than telling.
Right. So we've worked out this 3-month transition plan as a result of that, where she's actively looking for apartments that she can afford to move into.
Yeah.
Is finding a job, is actively employed, and I'm cutting her slack on monthly bills so that she can save her money for the down payment, with the goal of, 3 months from now, she's gonna 2021 is her launch year. So instead of you have 2 weeks and then you're out of here, it's, hey, let's talk about this because I'm flustered at what I'm seeing, and we need to come to some kind of common ground and understanding here, and I want you to be successful and I love you, but we have to move forward. So we have this 3-month transition program all set up, which has been helpful. So she, I know if she could choose, she would choose not to do the 3-month transition program, but she has a job, full-time job now, and she is actively looking for an apartment that she can afford, and it's discovered she will not be able to afford to live in Riverside. Like, I don't think I could afford to live in Riverside. So, and I live in Riverside. But so that was super helpful. Those kinds of things where
I want to take you back there and see if you can recognize what the difference was in your emotional state between the persecutor and the challenger. There was something there you just said.
Yeah, well, I kind of came to understanding that I was frustrated, right? And
so what's frustration?
With her, as much as it did my expectations weren't being met.
So what's frustration?
No,
not what's your frustration with her, but what is frustration?
Oh, frustration is just you think the outcome should be different than it is. It's not, something's not going the way you think it should go.
But what's the feeling you're having instead of frustration? What is it really?
Anger.
Yeah.
Thanks for leading me to that water.
It's okay. So recognizing the anger in the situation, because that's what you did. You recognize the anger in the situation and how your anger was affecting your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Recognizing it, and you go, well, this isn't helpful. I know why I'm feeling it, but it's not helpful. So now I've noted I'm feeling that. Right, let's take a different approach, which is let's be the challenger rather than the persecutor. Let's take my personal anger out of it. And then the person's usually much more responsive, because when we display our feelings outward, so it's called projection. So I'm going to project the feeling I'm feeling and I'm going to blame you for it. So as you said there, you have an expectation, right? I have this expectation. You don't have an agreement with her. So it's an unfair expectation because she doesn't know your expectation. Really, you're like, right, I need you to go, and she's like, whoa, hang on a second, dude. So then as a challenger, you make an agreement instead of an expectation. So an expectation is something that we have that the other person is often not party to, and then when you make an agreement, it's something that's agreed between the two of you, which is clearly what you've done now. You're like, right, here's our 3-month transition plan, rather than hey, you got 2, I'm pissed off, and to stop me being pissed off, you got to get out within 2 weeks.
Right.
And the other person's like, wow, where did this come from? Because it's been building up inside of you and they've not been aware of that.
Right.
And then suddenly, bang, that explosion.
Yeah.
That happens in a lot of our relationships where we have this expectation of how we want somebody to behave and what we want them to do, but we haven't actually clearly expressed it to them. And then the second part of that is we have to get their agreement. You can express whatever you want. if you don't get the other party's agreement, it's still an expectation, and you're likely to be, as you said, disappointed and frustrated because they're like, hey, I don't agree to that. So then we have to find that compromise that leads to an agreement where you can go, okay, I agree now. Now, I see where you're coming from. I agree. This is, maybe it's time for me to fly the nest, but I need a sensible way to do that. Like, it's too scary for me to just go in 2 weeks. I need to be financially set up. I need a secure job. I need to understand that, you know, I can find apartments I can afford and all of that stuff.
Yeah. And with Sharon, likewise, you know, just, I think she's heard more about my job recently than she has in the previous 30 years. Cause she always got the, hey, how was your day? Yeah, it was all right.
It's okay.
Moving on. Time to move on. Yeah.
Oh, we've all been there. And you struck on something I wanted to bring it up that you struck on earlier that I think is so important for men of our kind of age, where, you know, many have had kids, the kids are leaving home. And then suddenly, as you said, you know, even without, you know, add the pandemic onto it, it's much worse. But even without the pandemic, suddenly there's this loneliness because they have more time. You know, the kids are gone, they've got more time. As you say, they probably haven't spoken to their wife properly in years because most of the conversations have been around, hey, what are we doing with the kids? What are we doing here? You know, it's stuff. You're talking about chores, you're talking about stuff, you're talking about business, you're not talking about you and them. You're not saying, hey, you know, what does our future look like and what excites you? And, hey, you know, where are we going to go traveling when we retire? You're talking about daily tasks, and so much of our energy gets taken up on daily tasks that there isn't much energy left for that. And then suddenly the kids fly the nest and your job situation might change a little bit. And then it's like, oh, I've got all this time. What do I do now?
Right. Yeah. And really it was, you know, now we're in the house all the time. You know, Sharon used to joke with me during summer break after the third week of a 9-week summer break. When does school start again? You're driving me crazy. But the pandemic,
not the kids are driving me crazy. You're driving her crazy.
Yeah. But the pandemic has been, we've had that time together. And what I realized, I think what we both have realized, is that we've spent a lot doing for others, but we haven't really tended our own relationships. So
and that's so normal.
Yeah, we drove our son across country to Virginia. He was with us halfway, and then we drove back by ourselves and took 8 days to get back. And it was just us. It was a great time just to be together and to rediscover each other the way we knew pre-9 kids, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's why you see, you know, that's why suicide rates for middle-aged men are so high, because the relationship ends either with their children or with their partner because they haven't invested into it. You know, you hear this all the time from women, like, he's really busy, he doesn't care about me. And the care is probably there. They just don't know how to communicate it or what conversations need to be had. Because you fall into these patterns of not doing that. And then all of a sudden it's like, right, you know, the woman's like, okay, kids are gone. Let's get back to like we were when we first started dating. And the guy's like, I don't even understand how to do that. Like, what do you, what do you mean? What does that even look like?
You're right.
And then there's just the loneliness. Like, you know, I really appreciate you sharing with us. It's courageous of you to share that you felt lonely. So here's this guy that has a family of 11 and he was lonely. Like, how the fuck does that happen? How can you have a family of 11 and be
like
lonely?
I said, it was just so weird. I'm like, how am I feeling lonely when I have a house full of people? Like, that just didn't even fit right. So then I realized, oh, that's on me. That's not anybody else. You know, the loneliness is clearly sits on my shoulders. And so what am I going to do about it? So my group was the, like I said, just timely. It couldn't have been timed better for me personally, but it's given me that ability to kind of reconnect with, hey, here's who you are, and here's how you move forward in a healthy way so that you don't have to feel lonely. So, you know, I don't, if things are still, I'm okay. Like, I'm so much better with things being slowed down and not being running all the time and busy. I'm actually okay with that now. Like, I can sit and have a cup of coffee and think about absolutely nothing and not feel, you know, lonely.
So I kind of want to wrap this up. And the last thing I want to explore is what it's like as a man to have relationships with men. So when I first started doing men's work back in the UK, I was in my would have been my mid to late 20s. And I went and saw an osteopath, so that's the equivalent in UK of a chiropractor here in America, having issues with my back. And I went and saw the guy, and he's like, hey, you need to see my friend James, he's a therapist. And I'm like, I'm a man. I don't do that shit.
That's right.
Don't talk to me about feelings. And one of the things he said to me was, you should join a men's group. He was in a men's group, and he was like, there's nothing quite like kind of like the companionship, like being held. And he didn't mean physically, but he kind of meant like being held in the space of men. And he was like, there's nothing quite like it. I didn't really know what he meant until I joined a men's group. And, most of my close relationships have been with women, really, and they've been romantic relationships mainly. And then I kind of realized that, what I thought were friendships weren't really friendships. Like they were conveniences, like we went clubbing together, we played sport together, but we didn't talk about stuff. And then just the difference of going into this men's group where I was actually really seen and challenged, and guys were like, hey, what's going on for you? Like, we can see something's going on for you this week. What's happening? Like, what's going on? And just that space to talk with, other guys just sitting there and listening to me without the bullshit, without the protective banter, the kind of banter where, people are seeing your vulnerability and they're using it, to score points against you, rather than kind of leaning in and going, hey, I recognize that in me too, and I'm glad that you're sharing that. And if there's something I want to kind of get across is, we still have banter. There's still piss taking in our group and in our WhatsApp chat. It's not like there's no fun. It's not like there's no humor, because there's still piss taking, there's still humor, but it's just not cruel anymore. That kind of humor that's taken advantage of somebody's position or vulnerability or something, that's just gone. And the humor now is so much more good natured and welcoming. So that's something I really enjoy, and being forced to switch like that myself, like not having that kind of, put someone down humor. Instead, it's much more playful humor, and it's much more fun. So I'm kind of curious how those relationships are playing out for you, and kind of, what that has added or how that feels in your life.
Yeah. So I think guys are are masters of surface relationships.
Yeah.
Like I can meet any guy and talk sports. I can meet any guy and just BS about work, politics, you name it, just go on and have absolutely no connection to that person. So I can have a conversation with someone in the grocery store line, another guy in the grocery store line, don't even know his name, but we chuckle, laugh, there's no connection. And then you never see the guy again. I think we're masters as men at that. And so the men's group has, we're below the surface. Yeah, there's some little surfacey teasing that goes on, but we're below the surface. And what the particular instance that really hit it for me was when we shared pieces of gold and one offering of concern, right? And it was interesting to me. I'm like, I wonder if these guys really know who I am, because still, I shared some pretty heavy stuff in the group up to that point, but you still have a couple of cards close to the chest. I mean, we all do, right? I'd be lying if I said that all of my cards were on the table. I think all except for a couple are on the table, right? So, but one after one, when they offered their one concern, was like, oh, they really see who I am.
Damn, these guys see me.
They know it. It was nice to hear all those positive things. It was so nice to kind of realize that. And then how you told us, we can only say thank you. We can't respond. We can't give it back, because I'm the way I've operated over the years is I haven't always said thank you. I've said, oh yeah, you just don't know me all that well. So I've been self-deprecating in receiving of any kind of compliment. And so it was hard to say, oh, thank you for that. But the real eye-opener for me was, gosh, that guy nailed me. In fact, I emailed the guy that nailed me afterwards and said,
and I'm curious, had you ever met this person in real life?
I'm sorry? No. This is one
of the guys that you'd never met.
Yeah. One of the guys I never met. We did that exercise and I'm like, yeah, that's me. Exactly. And his feedback was, you're measured, the feedback you give, your responses you give are articulate, but it's obvious you've thought about it. You don't say much, but when you do, you've thought about what you're going to say. It'd be nice to see you just share from the heart more often rather than have everything planned out before you speak.
Calculated.
Like,
Yeah.
oh my
A
gosh,
little bit
that
more
is,
instinctive versus calculated.
yeah, that is me to a T. So I emailed him and thanked him for that, because yeah, that's been me. My motto has been, if you don't have anything valuable to say, don't say anything, and so I've taken that to the nth degree of just, I'm only going to say something when I really thought about it, rather than being more like,
And yet
being
it's
more
so
instinctive.
interesting, the little things that we share that can be so impactful.
Yeah,
Like you can just
right,
share one little thing. Hey, I just see this. And you're like, whoa, where did that come from? And like, oh,
right.
wow, yeah, that's really me. And I didn't even realize it myself. Yeah.
But that's not something I've had in my life for a long time. I haven't had guys call me out for who I am or who they perceive me to be.
It's
It's
hard.
been really more of, hey, you're a good guy. Hey, I have friends, Lee, but none of them would have said that. So I think in
Well,
some
it's you
ways,
got to build up that trust. So it's very, we do that carefully. Like the way the group
yeah,
is
yeah,
designed, like week to week, is to build the trust up. So some exercises are kind of like more sharing, and some exercises are kind of more cognitive models of ways to behave in the world, or recognizing behavior in the world. And it's a walking step designed to get you to the point where you feel safe sharing stuff. I mean, I hate the phrase safe space because that's kind of overused, but it's a container where you're safe, and that for people listening, one of the most important things about the men's group is the rule that we do not discuss like
mm-hmm,
particular details outside the group. So you don't talk about the men in the group. Like, you can share your own experiences that have happened in the group, but you don't talk about, the names of the guys. You'll see on this, we're not talking about names. We're not naming who's in the group. We're not talking about their experiences. We're only talking about our own experiences. And that's really important, because then that whatever you share in the group, some guy isn't going to run off and tell somebody else. It's just contained in the
right,
group. And then what that also gives you is it gives guys the vulnerability to be challenged. And I know personally, one of the things I most want in life is to be challenged. And I don't often get challenged. And it's like, I want people to challenge me. I want people to call me out on my shit. And I want people to see it. But I want them to do it in a loving way. Not you're an arsehole when you said this. That's not helpful. It's like, hey, I see this going on for you right now, and then I see that spilling out, like, what's going on? How are you? Like, what's behind that? That's real
right.
challenging, rather than just the kind of the spiteful sticking at somebody because you don't like what they've said. It's seeing the man behind that, the wound behind it that might be causing that behavior, and saying, hey, I see that. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah. So there's that saying, iron sharpens iron, right? And I
Yeah.
really feel like men's group has been that for me. Iron sharpens iron. So you have 8 guys, 9 guys that come on the call each week, and it really is about helping each other be better.
Yeah.
So it's not malicious. There's no malicious intent. It's a genuine care that's been built over time. And the thing I just shared, Lee, I think we did that month 5. Like, we had spent 5 months building trust
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
hey, let's do King's chair activity and let you guys sit and listen to what other guys have to say about you. It's powerful.
Yeah, I think that's a great space to end it on. Iron sharpens iron. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
I should probably
Yeah.
use that as a marketing slogan. So it's been lovely. Thank you very much for
Ah,
sharing your
you're
life
welcome.
with us, David, and your experiences in the group. I really appreciate it, mate.
My pleasure, Lee. Thank you for having me.